The Colleague of Cardinals met at the Vatican on Tuesday and decided on Saturday, April 26, is the date for Pope Francis' funeral and burial. More than 25 people were killed on Tuesday in the Indian region of Kashmir after the gunmen opened fire on a group of tourists. The International Monetary Fund says Donald Trump's tariff has unleashed a major negative shock into the world economy as it cut its forecast for global growth. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. The College of Cardinals met at the Vatican on Tuesday to debate plans for the funeral of Pope Francis and the conclave to elect his successor. Around 60 cardinals reportedly participated in the first meeting and decided on Saturday, April 26 as the date for the pontiff's funeral. His body will be previously transferred to St. Peter's Basilica on April 23rd and for the 3 days long public wake. Protocol calls for a state ceremony followed by a simple burial in the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, as Francis had ordered in his will. The coffin will be buried in the Pauline Chapel with no inscriptions beyond his name in Latin. The cardinals haven't set a date for the conclave to elect Francis' successor, but the current norms suggested to begin between 15 and 20 days after his passing. Latin America held a special place in Pope Francis' agenda with 7 trips that includes 10 countries in the region. His first international trip was to Brazil shortly after his election, and his last Latin American visit was to Panama in January 2019.
Francis, the first pope in history born in Latin America, had in this region some of the priorities of his pontificate, but he also found enormous challenges and limitations. During his visit to Cuba, Francis met with Commander Fidel Castro. Although it was a private meeting, it was an important moment because of his strong condemnation of the U.S. blockade against the island. The Supreme Pontiff also played a key role in the diplomatic rapprochement between Havana and Washington. During his visit to Brazil, the Pope criticized the inaction of the clergy, called for the recovery of the faithful and asked Catholics to go to the favelas of the cities, one of which he visited on that occasion. With gestures such as his support for peace in the region, Pope Francis gave the Vatican a leading role in peace negotiations such as the case of Colombia to seek an end to the armed conflict that plagues the country. Francis toured the Bolivian cities of El Alto, La Paz, and Santa Cruz. In this country, the Pope spoke of the sea and asked forgiveness for the oppression against indigenous peoples. In the midst of a serious political and economic crisis resulting from the U.S. blockade against Venezuela, the Pope took steps to establish a dialogue between the government of Nicolas Maduro and the opposition. Bergoglio took over the leadership of a church with great challenges and crises, 2 of which directly involved Latin America, the fall in the number of faithful and sexual abuse scandals within the church.
This Tuesday, the people from Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina, Pope Francis' homeland, have paid the late pontiff several tributes. In this way, the landmark obelisk became the main stage for a mapping that project the image of Pope together with the phrase, "Francis, the city purse for you." In addition, the Galileo Galilei planetarium was dyed in yellow as a symbol of mourning, reflecting the deep sadness, solidarity, and pride felt by the nation after the departure of Jorge Bergoglio. After Pope Francis' passing, nuns at the Vatican highlighted Supreme Pontificate efforts in advocating during his journey for women to have greater roles in governing church, including in high-ranking positions.
He is starting to get the responsibilities to the women in the church. An example, for the first time in the history, he entrusted a prefect to a sister of the missionary of Consolata, and then the governor, to lead the Vatican governor, he entrusted to a sister. From there, we can understand that the women, we also have the voice to contribute.
He cared with the women. That before less people talk about the women, but now more with thanks to this Pope that he raised up the women, that the women not live outside at the side, but need to involve with the life of the church, and not only in the church but in the society.
In this regard, during her morning press conference, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum highlights Pope Francis' influence on reforms within the Catholic Church and his critical view of neoliberalism and consumers.
His was a humanist way of thinking. Very progressive, let's put it like that. In the sense of it was always approaching the humblest, the poorest, the forgotten, calling the whole world to the construction of peace. Also his criticism of neoliberalism, consumerism, and a recovery of austerity values in his own person and in general in the Catholic Church.
Su propia persona y en general en la Iglesia Católica.
For his part, while addressing the Pope's legacy, Spanish Premier Pedro Sánchez underscored on Tuesday his advocacy for the fight against intolerance.
He was a leader who advocated for the fight against poverty, for a humanistic view of the migration phenomenon, for the mitigation and adaptation to climate change, or against intolerance when it was most needed. I am convinced that the world will miss his courage, his message, and from Spain we will honor his figure.
Moving on, activists and people of the world commemorating International Earth Day aimed climate crisis, warning effect in several countries. Environmental groups have issued numerous warning and campaigns globally, and the United Nations to raise awareness of the climate change that have caused devastation in many countries. In Cuba, authorities are fighting forest fires in Pinar del Rio, aimed at prolonged drought and complex weather conditions. Meanwhile, in Mexico, efforts are progressing to extinguish more than 100 forest outbreaks in the country forest area. Meanwhile, in Australia, the emergency service reported at least 7 deaths during a storm in the city of Sydney. In this sense, a call for reflections to preserve the ecological balance and promote sustainable development. Let's take a very first break, but don't go away because we'll be right back. Welcome back to From the South. During his program, Con Maduro Más, the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, accused his counterpart in El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, of being a serial and systematic violator of human rights after confessing to the kidnapping of 252 Venezuelan migrants in maximum security prisons. This comes in response to Nayib Bukele's recent proposals to exchange the Venezuelan migrants kidnapped in El Salvador for people condemned from terrorist acts and corruption in Venezuela. In this context, Maduro denounced the systematic violation of human rights against the people of Venezuela and the complicity of the extremist right wing in support of this aggression, demanding guarantees and the immediate release of the Venezuelan nationals. The Venezuelan head of state also denounced Bukele's actions against his own population, highlighting his repressive security policies and violation of the due process, stating that justice will be served for the crimes of his countrymen. In other news, a Colombian judge orders an investigation of cyclist Lucho Herrera for his possible involvement in forced displacements of 4 farmers. The request was issued by Judge Maria del Pilar Bocarejo in the Department of Cundinamarca, where Herrera was born and resides. According to a document, the judge based her decision on an anticipated sentence related to one of the paramilitaries implicated in this case. According to the sentence, the criminal pointed out to Herrera during the investigation carried out on October 11, 2022. This testimony has led to the authorities to consider the need to investigate further the possibility of participation of the cyclist in the serious event, which have left a deep mark in the local community. This Monday, the Ministry of Health of Colombia announced a health emergency decree as a priority protection measure due to the rise in yellow fever cases. In this way, per the document, people from 9 months onwards without age limit must be vaccinated if they live or are going to travel to risk areas. Vaccination will be carried out through the implementation of the mobilization of intensification and follow-up strategies depending on the risk category in which the municipality is located. In the midst of the brutal escalation of violence in Haiti, the special representative of the UN warns of the point of no return to which the country is headed. The erratic policies imposed by the United States and Canada with the backing of the Organizations of American States have plunged Haiti into an unstoppable spiral of violence. The UN's quarterly report presented to the Security Council on Monday by its special envoy Maria Isabel Salvador affirms that the country could drift into immense collapse and requests immediate additional support to the United Nations. Let's take our last break, but we invite you to stay because we'll be right back. Welcome back. In Palestine, authorities report that a new Israeli attack on a residential complex killed 19 civilians in the city of Khan Yunis. The parliamentary report detailed that 10 children were among the victims. On the other hand, the authorities specified that bombardments were registered to the north of Rafah and against tens of displaced people in Jabalia. Saud's army violated the ceasefire agreement by reactivating its criminal attacks on the coastal enclave on March 18 this year. Gaza authorities announced on Tuesday that the number of people killed by Israel has risen to more than 51,000 and at least 117,000 injured since the beginning of the genocide prepared by the occupation in Gaza. In Palestine, health authorities said more than 600,000 children are at risk due to Israel's blocks of vaccines in Gaza. Authorities add that children are at risk of permanent paralysis and chronic disabilities if polio vaccines are not provided, as Liver has been suspended for 30 days. The health ministry denounced that Israel's restrictions are slowing down strategies to move forward in polio prevent efforts. Doctors point out that children in Gaza also face a lack of necessary nutrition as well as a lack of drinking water, which endangers children's lives. More than 25 people were killed on Tuesday in the Indian region of Kashmir after gunmen opened fire on a group of tourists. The attack, which happens in the midst of a visit to the country's U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, occurred in the Baisaran village in the tourist town of Pahagam. The gunmen reportedly emerged from a dense pine forest and approached tourists towards the direction of the Nervan Mountains. Due to the area's lack of road access, helicopter services were deployed to evacuate the wounded, with officials describing the incident as the deadliest attack on civilians in the region in recent years. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with the Sultan of Oman, Haytham bin Tarin Al Said, who is in Moscow on a state visit. This is the first ever meeting between the two heads of states. Prior to that, they had spoken on the phone in March 2023, the first high-level bilateral contact between the two countries since the establishment of diplomatic relations. Both leaders pledged to work to enhance cooperation in different sectors. Putin also welcomed Oman's contributions to the negotiating process between Washington and Tehran around the Iranian nuclear dossier.
We strive to establish distinguished and beneficial relations between us that serve the people of both countries. Our meeting this morning was with a group of businessmen who are genuinely interested in developing this relationship. There are many fields of cooperation, whether in energy, agriculture, or trade, and many of them have already begun opening offices and exchanging visits.
In this context, the Russian president extended the Sultan an invitation to an upcoming summit between the League of Arab States and Russia.
We plan to hold a summit between Russia and the Arab countries this year. Many of our friends in the Arab world support this idea. Your Majesty, if you find the time, we would be delighted to see you at this summit between the League of Arab States and Russia.
The International Monetary Fund said Donald Trump's tariff have unleashed a major negative shock into the world economy as it cuts its forecast for global growth. In a stark assessment of the impact of U.S. President's policies, the organization cut its forecast for global GDP growth to 2.8% for this year. Its forecast showed every major economy being hit with a sharper deterioration for the U.S. From 2.7% to 1.8%. The IMF added that emerging economies might be hit specifically hard as unfavorable global financing conditions make it harder for them to service their debts, a situation that could be exacerbated by overseas aid cuts. On Monday, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba announced that Tokyo will not give in to U.S. demands to reach an agreement on the tariff imposed by President Donald Trump. The Prime Minister stressed that if the country gives in to Washington's condition, they will not be able to guarantee national interests. Japan has been working to protect agricultural and other key development sectors. Tokyo prepares its strategy to face a second round of negotiations between the end of April after representatives of the two countries held initial talks in early April. In Spain, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez announced an investment of security and defense spending. During a meeting with the local media, Sánchez pointed out that the Council of Ministers approved an industrial and technological plan to be sent to Brussels to be evaluated by the European Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The president said that the additional investments will be over 10.4 billion euros to allocate 2% of the gross domestic products by the end of 2025. We have come to the end of this news brief. For teleSUR English and from the south of Marmarrero, thank you for watching.